Hey everybody, Dan Schinder here with
Steven Schinder.
And this guy, Mr. Wetton and friends, playing An Extraordinary Life back in Morristown, New Jersey, 2011 with Asia, the original lineup. And Steve and I are going to review a wonderful book that comes out soon. And we'll talk to you about that whole process of reviewing. Let's enjoy John and the guys for a moment. So that's a bootleg recording. So the audio is not like it would be from a mixing board. We have to use bootleg versions so that our show doesn't get flagged by the Facebook algorithm. So Steve, first of all, I got to thank Steve because just a few days before we were going to do this show, Steve said, "You read the book, right?" And in all transparency, I've been just flat out pedal to the metal on the heels of returning a week after the Big Drum Talk TV 10-year anniversary show, and I've been in mad catch-up mode and just working on stuff. So no, I hadn't read the book. So a couple days later, this would have been Friday, Steve Dropboxes me him reading the book. It's 8 hours of Steve reading the book. I never heard this guy talk so much in his whole life since he was born. And you did a great job. It was so easy to listen to, and it helped because I go out in the morning with my dogs and I garden at 5 in the morning, everybody, for like an hour. I had a couple long drives that I listened to it on and just banged it all out. And it's such a great, I'm going to use the term read, even though I listened to it. But
right. And just to be just for the record, like it's only available between us two. Like no one else can access it.
Yeah, they only made two copies.
Yeah, we only printed two to read this book. You know.
Yeah, it's it's coming out. What was the date? Shortly after his birthday.
Yeah. So John Wetton, An Extraordinary Life comes out June 19th, last we heard, from Rocket 88, and people can go to johnwettonbook.com and pre-order it.
And we want to thank them very much for sending us a pre-copy to review. Steve, it's and great photo photography, or cover photography, just a really great package from what we can see.
Yeah, it's such a great cover, and there are two different editions people can look at on the site. Yeah,
and some great photos inside. There's one photo in there that I've ever seen, only one, and it's of the original Asia lineup, the first promo picture. I want to say something before we really launch into this, or I'll forget because it's not in my notes. I realized it when I pulled up that video that's in the beginning. So in that era, 82, when Asia first started, that's the first concert I ever went to of a prog rock band where anyone was wearing leather pants. And John was wearing leather pants. Really? And I had seen that in spandex with heavy metal bands like Iron Maiden and the Scorpions and UFO and all of that. And I saw John wearing leather pants. And I said, right then, I'm going to go buy some leather pants. And I did. I was playing drums in a progressive rock band in LA called Opus One. And so that was John's fashion inspiration or impression that he made on me. But this book is done much in the format as the book for Keith Emerson, where it's a lot of people within John's life that contributed. 72 people, right, Steve?
Something like that. It was a high number.
I think it's 72.
Okay, but it's sort of similar, but the structure and format is a bit different. And again, these are both from Rocket 88. The Keith Emerson one, which we reviewed a while ago, it was very much telling Keith's life in chronological order, and Chris Welch would include quotes from all the different people whenever they were relevant to that each period of his life, and the photos were
Right.
laid out throughout. With the John Wetton biography, it's a bit of a different approach. The way it's compiled, it's like each section is a different person talking about their memories of John. And for the most part, I feel like each person is inserted in sort of the chronological order of when they met or first worked with John. And
Not really, and I don't want to give a spoiler, but if you think of the last person, maybe that's the exception.
well, yeah,
If the rest
that's
of
why I
it's
say for the
correct.
most part.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, and so each person, whenever they come in, their whole piece is it unfolds in full. Each person gets anywhere from like 1 page to maybe like 10 pages. There are a few whose are longer than others, and it's a different approach, but both approaches are very valid and they both work for these books. And for this one, the pictures, instead of being throughout, they're each put in a couple different sections about midway through the book. You know, when we got the PDF and I was like scrolling through it, I was a little bit worried. I was like, oh, is this not gonna have pictures? I mean, it would still be a great story even without the pictures, but you know, with these rock biographies, you hope to see some memorabilia, and it's like, okay, yeah, these are
The history
in
and
here. Yeah.
vision. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very well made, and props to Nick Shelton, or sorry, Nick Shilton for editing this book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dave
A
Watkinson
great.
says, I'm echoing again. So,
Geez, what's up with that? Oh, I know what's up with that. Sorry. And sorry, I had some screens flash across my screen. So I want to start with a couple points. We'll kind of bounce around. Steve and I took notes. It was easier for him because he was reading it and I'm listening. And sometimes I wasn't able to stop with my phone while I was driving. I had to remember. And then when I got to where I was, I made notes. So if you don't mind, Steve, we'll just kind of bounce around like that.
right, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. One spoiler. I have to give this spoiler. The one spoiler, and it's not really a spoiler, but Jeff Downs did the eulogy. And
Yeah, it's at the
and
beginning.
Steve and I are going to make comments on some things that we learned that kind of surprised us, and we don't want you to look at them as spoilers. It won't prevent you from enjoying the book or absorbing the whole thing. It's not like we're giving Star Wars insights to a new character and this is who he killed or whatever. It's think of it more like teasers. And some of these nuggets that we don't know, maybe you folks knew. So it's conversational stuff. So if I may, Jeff Downs did the eulogy, and it was just maybe you can get Jeff to do mine. It was really it was just beautiful. And I learned so much just in that eulogy.
Yeah. You know, Jeff and John had such a huge writing partnership over the years, not just with Asia, but with Icon and Wetton Downs. So it was very fitting. And I was surprised how long the eulogy was. And the fact that he referenced Bury Me in Willow, which is my favorite Asia song, it's just so fitting, that eulogy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There were a couple like double take things that I heard you read from the book that I would have had no idea. One of the funniest ones to me was the fact that so John had played with Bill Bruford in two different bands, and we all know that Bill comes from jazz. And then to read that John just hated jazz and even went as far as to say, like, what's with Miles Davis blowing through that horn making farting sounds? You know, just the whole. And then, but so I just would love to know the conversations that he and Bill must have had on the road or in composition or recording about Bill defending jazz and John just shaking it off and waving him off. I could only imagine. I don't know. What do you think? That must have surprised you as well, yeah?
Yeah, it did kind of surprise me. And to also, there were couple comments where people said, you know, John Wetton loved pop music. And I guess when you look at Asia and how it was a hybrid between pop and prog rock, and even during the UK days, John wanted to go in a more commercial direction, and that sort of was some of the musical differences there. So I
Yeah.
guess that aspect is not too surprising, but it's interesting hearing about the stuff he's into in this book and how that people's reactions to that, and it's just such a fun read. Like for context, for people who may not be familiar with us, I got into, I guess, became a fan of John Wetton when you sent me the 2007 Fantasia DVD back when I would have been about 12, 13, something like that. And that was really the first band I got into apart from Yes, and was a gateway to exploring other prog rock bands. But you've been a John Wetton fan for much longer, right? When did you first become aware of him?
So I'm almost embarrassed to say that when I came upon John, I was unaware of King Crimson, which is kind of odd for someone my age. I'm 60 as we're recording this, and um, considering how much I was into prog, yes, Gentle Giant, all of them. I'm surprised I wasn't really into King Crimson. I didn't get exposed to ELP. I knew Greg Lake came from there, but my first exposure to John and his music and his wonderful voice was UK, and I can't quite remember how I came upon it unless I may have just heard a radio commercial and went and got the LP, which I still have. I still have all the LPs I grew up with. So that came out in 1979. So I would have been 16. And it blew my mind. It just blew. And the fact that Bill Bruford was on it, and I knew that John had been in King Crimson, but I just wasn't familiar with the music. I kind of knew or was reminded that Eddie was in Frank Zappa, and I knew nothing of Alan Holdsworth. I knew the name, but I didn't know any of his music. I was going to say I couldn't hum any of his music, but I'm not sure Alan could have either. So that was my first introduction, and I was kind of sideswiped when on the next album, Alan and Bill were gone, and that was my introduction to Terry Bozzio. And I was not disappointed. It was just like, man, I just got into this band. And then but then it was only about a year ago that I learned that most of the material on Danger Money was recorded by the original lineup, but it hadn't been finalized and released. So with Bozzio, they re-recorded everything, and those are the versions that ended up on the album. That just blew my mind to hear how Terry kind of reimagined Bill's stuff, and it's great. I love both versions. I love Night After Night. It's one of my favorite live albums. I wish it was a double. There is the one with an extended version, though, with extra songs. So that was my introduction to John Wetton.
Yeah, and throughout this biography, the 70s really show that John bounced between different bands that each had really big reputations. And you think about Asia and how it was a supergroup composed of these musicians that each had built up a lot of credibility. Steve and Carl had each been in Yes and ELP for 10 years, and Jeff had been in the Buggles and Yes. But John was in quite a number of bands, and
Yeah.
you think about how in, I guess you could call it a quote unquote normal life, people when they apply to jobs, on their resumes, people might get mixed ideas if they see that someone has had multiple jobs within a certain span of time. It's kind of like job hopping, but in music, especially in the bands John Wetton was in, it was as equally valid as being in a huge band for a decade. He was in all these different bands, and what was so a couple things. One thing that a few of the people interviewed for this book mention is how he is such a great bass player, and people sometimes focus more on the singing aspect than the bass playing. Like, you gotta remember he's a great bass player, and that reminded me of the Phil Collins comparison. Like, people love his singing, but sometimes forget that he's a great drummer as well.
In the pop world, especially, there's people that still don't even know he's a drummer.
Right.
Which
And oh, go ahead.
no, it's just because that's just crazy.
Oh,
I
yeah.
get it, but it's just whack when you know his true acumen.
Right. And another thing about these 70s bands, there's like a bunch of them: Mogul Thrash, Family, Roxy Music, Uriah Heep, um, UK. Another thing about this book that kind of this book kind of reminded me that John Wetton himself is a gateway to learning
A
about
ton of
these
music.
bands. Yeah, like I think one or two people in this book mentioned how they got into John Wetton via some of his later stuff, like maybe his solo stuff or through Asia, and then work backward and see all these other bands. And it helps these older bands get discovered through that way, like through reverse engineering and working backwards from John Wetton's journey, seeing what he's been in, and then they can be like, oh, this band that he was in is pretty good. I should check out more of their stuff. So
Yeah, once
I love that interconnectedness in music.
yeah, he's like a roadmap, as you said, to a bunch of different music. And once I got to know him through UK and Asia, I started to learn. I went back listening to some of the King Crimson stuff, which after reading the book, I got to get back to Red and Starless and all that stuff. But I learned how much, not how much, but how much I thought he had done. In reading the book, I was like just blown away by how much he's done. It's incredible.
Yeah, and they
There
start
were
from the
weird,
beginning with like the Richard Palmer James group onward. Yeah.
yeah, just weird things like him and Clapton talking about stuff. Uh, Martin Barr possibly in UK was a thing, and
Oh
just these
yeah.
weird connections that I never
Yeah.
knew about. And the fact that Steve Howe and John Wetton both auditioned for Atomic Rooster, I never knew that.
Yeah. And
Or
with
that Chris Squire auditioned for what became ELP. I never heard that.
yeah, I'm curious about whether he actually auditioned, because the way they word it is like Carl Palmer recalls that Keith Emerson went to check out Chris's singing. So I wonder if it was an actual audition or if he just went to maybe a Yes gig to hear what he sounds like. Like I'm very curious about that. But yeah, that would have been because ELP's first album came out after Time and a Word, so it would have been very early, yes, before it
It would
was
have been
really
called.
established that Chris was a prominent member throughout almost all their history.
Yeah, would have been ESP,
Oh, yeah, that would have been interesting.
which works. Yeah, can you imagine that band?
Yeah, and I think John Wetton was considered as well. And there's also Martin Darville in the book mentions that in 2002 there were talks with Phil Carson of doing Palmer, Wetton, Emerson, or maybe it was Emerson, Wetton, Palmer, something like that. But it didn't come together, and
Right.
there are like all these. There are maybe a couple other band projects that were mentioned where they just didn't come together. John and Keith working together would have been so cool, but um, yeah, it's just weird to think about the stuff that almost happened. Like Wakeman could have been in UK, but there's yeah,
And also Asia. And I was just going to bring that up, and I'm just checking the time because we have to be done by 1 today, Pacific.
yeah.
So,
I think we're good on time. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. The fact that ever since the inception of Asia, in the very beginning, before we heard music, before we saw pictures, there was a rumor that the band was John Wetton, Carl Palmer, Steve Howe, and Rick Wakeman. Then when they came out and you saw Jeff Downs, it was like, okay, someone that just didn't really know them that well got the wrong keyboard player name. But finally, in this book, it does say that Rick was on the bill and they just couldn't work it out management wise and all that BS. So Steve brought Jeff along, and look what happened with that. One of the greatest writing partnerships ever when it comes to songwriting and composition. Just magical, just magical.
yeah. And also to read that the Asia reunion almost happened in the late '90s, but without Steve Howe, it's another weird thing.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a reunion.
Right. Well, not yeah. Like you still have gotten Carl and Wetton back, and that would have been huge, but wouldn't have been the original lineup.
Yeah.
And throughout this book, you get a good sense of what these bands meant to John. You know, you hear how important King Crimson was to him and how big Asia was for him. And it's interesting reading all these different perspectives and seeing what they have in common. You know, people talk about his career, and of course, they talk about his triumph against alcoholism, and you know it's a big part of the book. But you know, bless him for being able to get past that, and I'm glad that he was able to do so. And it seemed like that last however long it was before he passed away, like a
10
decade or
years.
so. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
10
last
years
decade
sober.
he really was living his best life being sober.
Yeah, it truly is an extraordinary life the way it unfolds in this book. And when we talk about John Wetton, the man, aside from the whole musicianship, and there's a bit of crossover, the fact that just the humility that spills out of him from everybody's comments and how they said how he was and all of that was just so touching. I love that. For those who don't know, I knew Alan White since 1989, and Alan was the same way. He was just a regular guy that happened to be an amazing musician, but he was quite as down to earth as one could be. And there's a lot of good guys and ladies like that out there in the industry, and it's nice to see them get their due and get that nod. But to every person that contributed to this, that's the one of the biggest common threads. I'm gonna peek at some notes also to see.
Yeah. Well, while you do that, I'll mention that, you know, with Alan having passed, they got Gigi White to
Yeah,
chime in this book.
yeah,
And I think the Wetton Manzanera project with, I think you were surprised to learn Alan White was part of that, right? I think I was too.
yeah, yeah. And I'm reading a note regarding Wakeman with Bill possibly being in UK. I wonder if any of that is recorded or exists anywhere where it might get repurposed or purposed at all.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would love to hear if that was recorded, but maybe it hadn't been recorded, so who knows?
Jill's account of Don Henley and the other Eagles being just huge fans and coming to gigs and stuff, UK and Asia gigs is, yeah, there's just some really, really neat stuff in here. Yeah, Alan with Wetton and Manzanera, that whole Geffen Atlantic thing with the managers and the record contract issue. You know, I remember when Yes did the Union tour, and Gigi explained to me, why wasn't Alan there? We weren't at their house. I saw her driving, and your brother had just been born, and that's when I met her, when your mom was pregnant with Alex. And so we
Yeah.
saw each other driving, and we pulled over so she could see the baby, see Alex. And then she told me what was going to happen. Oh, there's going to be this big tour. They're getting the old guys together. You know, and she told me who the lineup was. And she said it's kind of complicated because every band member has a different manager and they're working everything out.
Yeah.
And my head almost spun thinking there's 8 guys and everyone has a different manager. And it's a shame how sometimes that dictates, you know, just how things
Yeah.
go. And that's the case of some of these things we're talking about, where management just didn't let it happen. They wanted maybe a record to go a certain way, or they wanted, each record company wanted the other guy to come to their thing with the project. It just,
Yeah.
you know, can we just be creative and put out music, for goodness
Yeah,
sakes?
it's kind of like how it used to be with movie stars, where I think there was a time when movie stars could only work
Signed
with a
to
certain
studios.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, creativity needs to triumph. Another note I have is that apparently And You and I was considered for the Asia reunion tour.
Who
Now I
was?
know
Sorry.
And You and I, the song.
Oh, yeah, that.
Yeah,
Yes.
like I know they played Roundabout, but I can't find if they did play And You and I and how that would have gone. Like that would have been interesting. Um,
Yeah. Trying to imagine it.
yeah. And also Annie Haslam, like there's a good deal about her role in helping John
Oh,
in
yeah. I
his
wish we
healing
knew that when
journey.
we interviewed her. We have to have her back on.
Yeah. Yeah, just an amazing person. And yeah, I love the accounts that are included in this. Like we've got Jill and we got John's son Dylan and Dylan's mom and of course Lisa Wetton. We get like a great spectrum, like friends, family, the people he worked with in music, his webmaster, and learning about how he interacted with the fans in that area. It's really cool, like seeing how down to earth he was.
Him interacting in the fan club under different avatar names, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's genius. I love that. That shows humility where he's really truly interested, and
Yeah.
doesn't want to get in there just to show off and be like, "Hey, it's me, John Wetton." I just love how the stories are told about him.
Yeah.
What was the most? I don't think this would be a spoiler. If you don't want to answer it, you don't have to. But what was maybe the most shocking thing that you learned?
Um yeah, that's a good question.
Maybe one musically and one personally.
I guess there's an account in the book of there's some sort of convention, and the people who knew John were trying to make sure that he was well enough there, and how that went down. Like, I guess that's one of them.
It was basically a John Wetton festival, basically, folks, for
Right.
context.
And musically, yeah, I don't know, for musically, like, what was the most shocking thing? I feel like I've already mentioned the things that almost happened. And, when I was reading those, I did a double take when I read the lineups that almost could have been. I
Yeah.
guess one of them that I haven't mentioned is that when they were working out the Asia reunion and trying to work things out with John Payne, who would go on to form his version. Wetton was open to having Payne open for them with an acoustic set. So that was, I guess, shows just how much he was willing to compromise. And this book covers such a huge chunk of history, like rock history, and we even get like the perspective of Sam Colson when he replaced Steve Howe for Gravitas, which that album apparently was almost called Valkyrie, which I sometimes misremember
Right.
that as the title of it anyway. So it's like that was kind of funny. And here,
Ronthal.
yeah, hearing Bumblefoot's approach to how he would try to do the Asia music, like he didn't want to try to emulate John Wetton, but he wanted to try the Asia music how people expect it to be sung, and and showing just how big shoes to fill John Wetton is.
Right.
And
Sorry, my dog just brought something in here. Hold on. It's not an
okay,
animal, is it, baby?
yeah,
Okay. Sorry about that, folks. That startled me. You can't have this, baby.
yeah, no
Okay.
worries. And for people who are only listening, I'm wearing my Royal Affair tour shirt, which also includes the Asia logo and Carl Palmer's EOP legacy as well, and John Launch. There's
Right.
a little bit of everything. Um, so yeah, what about you? Like, was there anything that was like
One,
shocking or surprising to you that you haven't mentioned?
I think for me on the personal side, what really, really, really showed me how down to earth he was when I forgot who mentioned this, but they said he bought a motor, meaning a car. He bought a car that he covered with vinyl seat covering because he would often go to bars and pick up drunks so they wouldn't drive home.
Mm.
And members that were still going through AA with him, and he covered all this so that if they threw up or something, it'd be easy to clean up. Like, this is John Wetton. You don't think of big music stars, big entertainers doing things like that. But he really, really believed in the service aspect of life and really embraced AA and helping somebody else. That became his mission. So on the personal side, that was a big one for me. On the
Yeah,
musical side, I think, gosh, there's so many.
yeah, like he's worked with a
Another,
lot of people. Yeah.
yeah, another one that crosses over between the two is that Ringo and Barbara Bach helped him stay in rehab, which I thought was like,
Mm.
oh wow, that's sometimes these names come across that you don't think like, oh, they would know each other.
Right.
I think on the musical side, I'd have to say, so remember before we started, I was searching for a video and I
Yeah.
found a video that we couldn't use and I saw the pick taped to his thumb. So reading about that his thumb would get cut open. So he was using a pick, but then the pick had to get taped to his thumb, and then the pick would get so sharpened it would literally cut through his bass strings if they didn't change his thumb every 3 songs. That was like, what? That blew my mind. Do you remember reading that part?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the musical part, if we can call that a musical part. Yeah.
Yeah. So this book is incredible. People should definitely give it a read. It like even if you know John Wetton's like all the works that he's done, like you'll still enjoy the way that these perspectives are told from each of these different people. We've got several Yes musicians, some Asia musicians, King Crimson, and people he's worked with like with the labels and management. And
Exactly.
there's Martha Quinn. That
That
was
was
one of them.
cool.
That yeah,
Yeah, she was one of. I think I got a little teary because I flashed back to when MTV came out, and that's when I first saw Martha Quinn, and she was one of my favorite VJs. But when she mentioned that he mentions in Wildest Dreams, the VJs, that everyone at MTV just went nuts to get that kind of recognition on the biggest album of the year. Like that whole story she told was great.
yeah. It just goes to show what all this means to people who
Yeah.
love John Wetton's music and him as a person. Like it gets very emotional like throughout this book, hearing everyone's like he was such a great guy. Like this book really illustrates that.
Yeah. Do we have any comments? We do. I see in the corner. You want to read them? You probably
Uh
see them better than I
yeah, I
can.
see Dave Watkinson says I heard John in the 70s with King Crimson albums, saw him in UK and Asia's first tours. Met John at the Brighton show for King Crimson a few years ago. He was very special and has left a stunning catalog of work. And I see Joshua VP said ESP exists, Eric Singer project, and then did a winky face.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, Thomas Jacob Lovelace is also chiming in. Let me see if I can get to those comments.
I didn't know
Just
Squire played with Eric Singer. Just kidding.
yeah, just scrolling through those comments. Let's see. Says, love that song too. An Extraordinary Life. Was his wife involved? Interesting question. Thomas also says, I saw Asia on the first album tour. They had a juggler open the show. Wait, what? We
That's
were in
right.
the
They
first
did.
row. Um, yeah, said,
Where
love
did
me
you? What
some
year was that?
ELP. A Bozio. Sorry,
I'm
what?
sorry. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask him what year that was because I've heard there. I read in the book, or you read to me in the
Oh, on
book
their
that
first album tour. So
yeah,
that would have
because
been
there was
1982.
in the book they cited a comedian as well, but when I saw them, it was the juggler. I saw that tour at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, and then I saw the second tour. I don't remember where, and then I saw before then I saw UK with Terry Bozzio open for Jethro Tull, and at the first Asia tour concert, I went and met them. They did a meet and greet at. Not many people were doing that back then. Like I never heard of it until then. Like, you mean we can go meet them? Oh no, I had met Rick Derringer once at a record store before then, but they were at Tower Records on Sunset, and I should have dug those out. I have pictures of all four of them from that. And to be honest with you, they are not smiling in any of them. They look so fried and worn out, and I don't blame them. I mean, they were in their mid 30s or whatever, or early 30s, but they gave it all on the stage, and you could tell they were like, I don't know if we should have booked this. They must have been fried. But it
Yeah.
was great to meet them. They were all very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know the original Asia run in the early 80s is considered legendary, and it is. But for me, I love the reunion period. Those three albums Phoenix, Omega, Triple X, and even Gravitas, which came with Sam Coulson, was great. And I there's a point in this book where it talks about how John Wetton reuniting with some of these bands later on was kind of like sort of a healing of like how things went in the past, and
Yeah.
I really got that sense listening to those reunion albums as they came out.
Yeah. And by the way, I just remembered June 12th is John's birthday. And on Drum
Yeah.
Talk TV and Yesshift, we're going to do an episode of Dan's almost daily vlog on Drum Talk TV, which will simulcast here on Yesshift. And I'm going to do a tribute to John Wetton of UK and Asia songs. UK songs from either of the first two albums and Asia songs from the first three albums, simply because that's what I'm most familiar with, and I don't have time to learn anything right now. So Steve will be posting stuff about that. I'm very excited about that because I love, love, love playing the music. Thank you guys, all of you from both bands. I love playing the music from those first three Asia albums, and I love playing the music from the first for both UK albums. So tune in. We'll have some fun, and I want suggestions. You could start them right here, and then Steve will be posting, and then a day or two ahead of time, I'll compile a set list based on a few things. What everyone suggests, coupled with what I remember how to play, and three, the fact that I can find a good bootleg version of it to play to.
Right. Yeah.
And we'll celebrate John's music on that day. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was gonna say that'll be a great celebration.
Yeah.
So I guess now that we've talked about the book, we can scroll through these comments on the doc
Yeah.
we have.
Yes.
As I was advertising this show, I posed a question to people: what's your favorite John Wetton work or works? So first we have Max Hunt, who we had on our show about a month ago. He says Midnight Sun.
Figures, keyboard player.
And Dave Walkinson, who sent us a picture, who says, truly blessed with an extraordinary voice and writing talent, not to forget a bass sound and stage persona that made you smile. One from
Yeah,
the
thanks for
first
that
London-
picture, Dave. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is about the pic. He says, one from the first London Asia shows I took. So, yeah, it's a really good picture there.
And those are the leather pants. I saw that and said, oh, okay, it's okay to wear leather pants in a prog band. I'm in.
Yeah, like totally wear leather plants. Yeah. Kevin Ward says he made extraordinary contributions to Uriah Heep during his brief stint with them, changing their sound radically, especially vocally. But I think I most enjoy his bass playing on some of the more improvised King Crimson tracks, like Providence, for example. I only got to see him live once when UK opened for Jethro Tull in the late 70s. He was a monster live on bass. And talk about a bill, like UK and Jethro Tull, it's so cool.
Oh, I know. That blew my mind. It was great. It was great. Carol White says, awesome skills and sounds wonderful too. Robert Pedrucci says, an extraordinary life, Bury Me in Willow and Rendezvous 602. Perfect. Myron Blakely says, one song I really love is the remix version of Midnight Sun I found on an import 12-inch B-side. How interesting.
Yeah. Andres Villa says UK. Joseph Aruda says UK, his King Crimson run, and a handful of solo bits. Rick Nelson says Lark's Tongues and Aspic Part 2. That's a trippy one. Brad J. Bushman, UK. Peter Willett says, got to go with Astra, such a phenomenal album. Love it. Of course, that's the third Asia album. Robert Cowell says, Battle Lines, it was one of the most beautiful songs ever written. Ron P. Swegman says, UK.
Not to be confused with Ron Swegman. This is Ron P. Swegman.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to be clear.
Yeah, so Ron says UK's In the Dead of Night, the full suite, and Wildest Dreams from Asia's debut LP.
And then we have
next one.
Yeah, I think it's pronounced Ale or Ale. It's spelled like Ale, but Ale Ocampo. I have to say I love all his work with Asia. As strange as it seems, when Asia came up, the only member I didn't know was John. Same for me almost, if it wasn't for UK. Of course, I knew of Uriah Heep, Roxy Music, but I was more into Yes and ELP and already knew Jeff through the Buggles. When I first listened to his amazing voice, I immediately became a fan and followed him. John was really extraordinary. So I have to say more about his work with Asia, his collaborations with Jeff as well. I remember how happy I was when they reunited. And John's voice was great as ever. Favorite tracks? Many, but I'll put two. The Smile Has Left Your Eyes, a very moving song. John's vocals was perhaps at its best, in my opinion. And from the reunion era, Holy War, a song I listened to over and over again. By the way, I do hope Jeff is able to gift all of us with the unreleased stuff with John. That would be amazing. Thanks for
Yeah.
everybody's contributions. And we have Christopher Lee with a list of favorite albums. I'll run through these. We've got favorite Wetton albums: Red with King Crimson, Asia the debut, UK the debut, Lark's Tongues and Aspect. That's hard for me to say. Lark's Tongues and Aspect, King Crimson, Voicemail, Wetton Manzanera. That's a good list right there of albums.
Yeah, it really shows the breadth of his work there. Rain Savolainen says everything John Wetton touched turned to pure gold. I agree. Pascal
Yeah.
Lambert says Parallel Worlds, Vortex, Dea. That's a three-part suite from Asia's Phoenix album. How do I pronounce this next one?
That would be Wojciech Kostrzyński.
Okay. So they say my favorite Wetton albums: Red by King Crimson, The Greatest Show on Earth by Wetton, Nolan, and Friends. And then we got Akira Unten Kunigami, who says, I love The Last Thing on My Mind with the intro guitar of Killminster, Martin Orford on keys. Ernesto Mendoza says, I think Wetton's best work was with King Crimson, UK, and the first era of Asia. Want to read this next one?
Yeah, Errol Cuthbert says vocals wise, it's Without You, usually followed by any of magazines, Rendezvous 602, Woman and Orchard of Minds. Of course, so many other great performances by that golden throat. In the Dead of Night is probably the most special song with John Wetton in it because of the magnificent Holdsworth guitar solo in it. After the original UK dismantled, John Wetton always included that song in his sets, where several other great guitarists have their updates on the classic solo. Interesting.
Right. Yeah,
That's true.
Francisco Marquez says incredible dexterity in his musicianship, incredible voice, my favorite singer of all time. It's very high praise. Mike Jaworski says UK. Peter Stoneham says Soul Survivor and Don't Cry, brilliant songs. Carl Palmer and the band at their very best. Rest in peace, John Wetton. Fabio Liborio Rocha says Danger Money. Thane Carlson says In the End with Annie Haslam. I've Come to Take You Home. Battle Lines, Hold Me Now, and Walking on Air.
That's a nice list too. Timo says, and I don't know if that's his last name with should be a comma and then his first name, or if it's his first, probably his first name first because there's no comma. So Timo says, this band was a massive part of my teenage years. I was 16 when I first heard that captivating song, Heat of the Moment, and followed by Only Time Will Tell. And he's got a heart. I was hooked. I followed every single album and went to watch them perform live on numerous occasions, being that the band became my favorite go-to band for listening at home, in the car, even laying at the beach, beating my previous favorite band, Whitesnake. Wow. I only am taken aback by that because they're so different. And for someone to gravitate with gravitas to a new band as their favorite that is just so different, that is high praise. That's really cool, Timo. And then he says, or she, sorry, I think it's a he. We've seen comments from Timo before. Into the Hartley second place. Whitesnake, that is. Still, to this day, Asia still play a massive part in what has become the very eclectic musical journey. My live go-to band, now whom I believe have a solid resemblance to Asia, are my northern-based and much-loved and strongly followed band is Dare. I see the similarities between them, especially with the brilliant guitarist Vinnie Burns, having played with Asia during the 90s. John Wetton's voice is a strong reminder of those best years of Asia back in the early 80s, producing some legendary tracks that for song lovers like myself will stay with us till the end. John may be gone, but to coin a song, his smile hasn't left our eyes.
Mm.
That
Yeah,
was
that's a
great.
real great sentiment. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I think he
Uh,
likes the band.
yeah. Enrique A. Gomez Montiel says, list of top five. So from 1 to 5, King Crimson, Starless, UK in the Dead of Night, Asia's A Smile Has Left Your Eyes, John Wetton's Battle Lines, and Wetton Manzanera, It's Just Love. Ian Chambers says, for me, my most thrashed Wetton work is the entire Red album. An absolute masterpiece. The first UK album was also mind-blowing. Rest in peace. Gandu Permana says, Battle Lines, Hold Me Now, The Smile Has Left Your Eyes, Heat of a Moment, and Starless. Matt Curran says UK. Kevin Hewitson says Mogul Thrash. I think that's maybe the only mention here, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Mark Kinjan says Danger Money, but I love pretty much his whole catalog. John Costello says it depends on what I'm in the mood to listen to at any given moment, but anything that John Wetton did with King Crimson in UK and the first 2 Asia albums are at the top of the list. And do I read these last couple?
Yeah, Chris Ramsbottom Pampling says, after some time, I've settled on Starless. He's the only one who can sing it with knowledge that comes across. That's an interesting take. And there's, of course, there's always a comment from some troll. Billy Sherwood. Both UK
familiar.
albums. Thanks for chiming in, Billy.
Yeah, Billy is
Who's
also
doing a great job with Asia, by the way.
Yeah, after Wetton passed, he'd asked Billy to sing and play bass in his stead, which he did, and I think he did a good job. And he played bass still when Bumblefoot joined for the Royal Affair tour. So I'm hoping that Asia is still able to work out the touring stuff in the near future. I'd love to see them again. But yeah, Billy had some great things to say about John in the book as well.
Yeah, their time working together at his house for a month.
Yeah, and Oliver Wakeman was another good one, talking about his chats with John, like, again, just showing how down-to-earth John Wetton was.
Yeah.
Some great accounts all around in that book.
I just remembered something. The gentleman from Saga who he knew and worked with. We're having, on looking at my calendar, I think it's a Wednesday. Yeah, Steve Negus, Wednesday the 21st at noon Pacific, the original drummer for Saga, just put out a solo album. I would hold it up, but it's in my truck. And so we're going to ask him if by association he spent some time with John and if he was influenced by him.
Yeah, that would be cool. And,
we'll have plenty of time. I just want to mention, Steve, we'll have plenty of opportunity to keep bringing the topic of this wonderful book up, because there's so many people in that book that are friends of ours that we've worked with, that have been on Drum Talk TV and or Yesshift with Billy Sherwood, Oliver Wakeman, Annie Haslam. We'll probably get Gigi White on. I've messaged with Lisa back and forth a few times. So Steve Hackett, Steve Howe, so many others. Bill Bruford. There's probably 12.5 people we know that are in the book that we could get on and help promote the book, because this is a really great. Would this be called a biography?
Yeah.
Biography by account, by quote?
Yeah, it's a biography because it tells his story. Yeah. And we are having Oliver Wakeman on the show again.
That's right.
Yeah, we're looking at Wednesday, June 28th, noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern U.S. time, and 8 p.m. UK time. UK, not the band, but the place, So, yeah, that'll be broadcast here on Yesshift and simulcast on Drum Talk TV. So, yeah, again, like John Wetton worked with so many people, and he's pretty much like a nexus connecting point, I guess you could say.
That's a great way to put it.
Are
there any other comments that we didn't get to?
Let me double check. Dave
on both
Watkinson
Yesshift and Drum Talk TV.
Yeah, Dave Watkinson said "Easy Money," such a good track. I think that's actually the first time I ever heard Wetton's voice in the Yes Years documentary.
Oh,
When they're talking about Bill joining King Crimson, and then it cuts to them playing that song. It's like easy money. Like that was my first time that I'm aware hearing John Wetton's voice. Now that I think about
interesting.
it, yeah. So yeah, I think that's all the comments. So people go to johnwettonbook.com and order this very amazing work. You'll really enjoy reading it, I promise. It's so good.
It's
highly
very
recommend it.
touching. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very, very touching. It really is. You hear, it's touching from so many different perspectives, being that the different people in this knew John from some of the same and some different perspectives.
Yeah, like they go through the ups and downs, and Jeff Downs, but ultimately, it's an extraordinary journey, and it's a lot of very heartwarming stuff.
Absolutely. We will close with letting some of that other video play out. So here you go, folks. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you again soon.